Ryan Gosling, the man, the meme, the legend. I've been fascinated by Ryan for many years because he has this interesting culture surrounding him. And I say culture so ambiguously because it's hard to pinpoint a community that doesn't like Ryan Gosling. He has teetered the line of being an indie movie darling and a box office king so effortlessly for the last 20 years. And even more bizarrely, he is beloved by both women and incels. We won't get into that, but there is an interesting intersection between all of his fans that is very unique, and I think that he just might have the craziest Venn diagram of fans to exist for any celebrity. So how did Ryan Gosling become such a critical part of our cultural zeitgeist and internet zeitgeist? I truly wanted to understand how he became the icon that he is. And so I began researching. I began studying Gosling theory. I said he's literally me 3 times in the mirror and then turned the lights out real fast. He's literally me. He's literally me. He's literally me. I even bought a life-sized cardboard cutout of him off of eBay. Yes, this is life-sized. They've been digitally enhancing him for years. But that's when I realized that the only way to get to the bottom of this and become a true Ryan Gozzler was to watch every single one of his films over the course of a month, analyze them, and then rank them all. So if you could, would you please allow me to explain Frankenstein and Me is a Disney movie, and unfortunately, it's not on Disney Plus or any other streaming platform. So I had to resort to watching somebody else's screen recording of it on YouTube, which was fine with me because I'm not a 1080p elitist. I will literally watch a movie even if it looks like Roblox as long as it's free. But then I realized that this person didn't even turn off their notifications before they screen recorded it. I'll admit, it was a bit of a jump scare when they got multiple texts from someone named Chunk. This movie is about 2 brothers, Larry and Earl, and they become obsessed with creating a Frankenstein when their dad unexpectedly dies. Very common trauma response, I know. Ryan Gosling plays their friend Kenny, and he has some really good moments in this. Like, he has a girlfriend who thinks that these brothers are freaky as hell for being into monsters and Frankenstein, and he's just like a really good friend that comes to their defense.
All the kids at school say he does the weirdest things.
Yeah, well, all the kids at school don't know him, and neither do you. I mean, you've been here for a week. Give him a chance.
But the funny thing is that everybody else in this movie acts like these brothers are Satan's spawn just because they're interested in monsters. Even the adults.
This is garbage, okay? It's garbage. It's fantasy. Life is a lot harder than this. Hey!
But anyways, after the tragedy of losing their father, Larry has to go to the hospital to get his tonsils out. And this is very triggering for Earl because he fears his brother dying just like his dad did, you know? And that is so sad, but this leads to Ryan Gosling saying one of the funniest lines in this movie.
Earl's freaking out because he's in a hospital and his dad died in a hospital.
He's in a hospital and his dad died in a hospital. Anyways, so there's this carnival in town and it has this quote-unquote real Frankenstein attraction. And when Earl sees this, he's like attracted to it like a moth to a flame. He's like, oh yeah, like a real Frankenstein? Are you kidding me? And lucky for him, the day that they pack the carnival up, this guy puts Frankenstein in the back of his truck and he's driving away and he's like eating a donut. He's driving all crazy. I've literally never seen anybody drive like this, but he drops Frankenstein out of the truck on accident, and Earl sees this and he's like, oh wow, oh. And so he takes his dad's truck to Kenny's house and he convinces him to go help him steal the Frankenstein off the side of the road. And Kenny is literally like, Earl, this is plastic, this is not real, I don't know why you think it's real.
It's Frankenstein's monster, Kenny.
Sure it is.
But Earl is convinced, and he's convinced that it's his destiny that he found this Frankenstein.
He's the real thing, Kenny. He's not yours, Earl. Don't you get it? Him falling off the truck, it's like... it's destiny.
This is so bipolar coded, by the way. I relate to this kid like too much.
It's not destiny, Earl, okay? It's robbery. It is not!
But they put him in the back of the truck, and then these 12-year-olds are just driving around with a Frankenstein in their car, and they end up having to stop for gas. And the gas station attendant is, of course, like, why are these two pipsqueaks driving this truck around? And he sees the Frankenstein in the back seat, and somehow they're able to convince him that this is their drunk dad, and they're just driving him home.
Say now, ain't you a little young to be driving that there truck?
Well, you know, yeah, we are, but our dad's dead drunk, and we gotta drive him home.
And I guess that is totally believable. Like, you know how sometimes when you get drunk and then you just look like Frankenstein? Meanwhile, the owner of the Frankenstein is at the police station just like pissed off that his Frankenstein is lost.
Listen, Mr. Clemenson, I said I'll get the monster back. Yeah, well, you darn well better. You have any idea what that sack of moldy leather brings in every day?
And he's just like accusing anybody of stealing it, which is so funny because that's like the last conclusion that I would come to. How many people want to steal Frankenstein? Maybe that's just a ratio that I don't understand. And at this point in the movie, I was really hoping for some like quirky, silly Frankenstein action. You know, like, eh, show me the nuts, show me the bolts. But unfortunately, we don't get any of the Frankenstein action. Almost nothing happens in the whole first hour of this movie besides Kenny and Earl just obtaining the Frankenstein. But in the last 20 minutes, they actually go to an abandoned building and try to bring the Frankenstein back to life, or to life. And unbeknownst to them, Kenny's girlfriend follows them there and is like pissed off that she wasn't invited, which leads them to getting into a fight that's honestly funny as fuck.
Hey, Mrs. Williams, can I use your phone? I gotta call my girlfriend. We're gonna bring Frankenstein's monster back to life.
Oh, so I should figure it out on my own.
They wait for the perfect moment during this storm that's going on for lightning to strike Frankenstein because Earl thinks that's what's gonna bring him to life, but it doesn't work. And as he's coming to this realization that this Frankenstein's never gonna come to life, the cop from earlier shows up because his mom is looking for him and is like, sorry, gotta bring you down to the station. You're a Frankenstein bandit.
Sorry, Earl, but we're gonna have to go down to the station.
No! It's alive! I know it is!
And then, I'm not even kidding, he has to go to fucking court for trying to bring Frankenstein to life. This movie was 90% trauma, 5% Frankenstein, and the other 5% Ryan Gosling saying sassy things.
We're gonna bring Frankenstein's monster back to life.
It definitely subverted my expectations for a children's movie about Frankenstein. So for that reason, I guess this bipolar Frankenstein story is pretty cool. Relax. This is a movie about cowboys, and unfortunately, the cowboys aren't even gay. Basically, this cowboy named Richmond gets totally horned up over this lady he meets at a country club named Gloria. And Gloria is fancy, you know, she like works at a hat store, she's girly, she's rich, and all the men are obsessed with her, but she gives no fucks and rejects all of them. And she falls for Richmond instead because he's different, TM, and she leaves her rich girl lifestyle for the country life. From then on out, most of this movie, like 80%, is basically just about marital issues. And not in the memeable Adam Driver punching a wall sort of way. Marital issues in the I want to eat glue right now, I'm so bored kind of way. Ryan Gosling is probably in this movie for about like 10 minutes total. He plays a guy named Tommy and he has a brother named Timmy, and they run a little store in town where like you can buy clothes and stuff, and they talk like No, unfortunately, it's not as cool as that, but his name is Tommy. And basically, he wants to work for Richmond and round up cattle for him on his cowboy journey. I tried to rewatch this movie a second time to try and figure out why they were going on this cowboy journey, but I couldn't find an explanation, so either it's not stated or my brain simply couldn't handle listening to them talk anymore. But anyways, Richmond hires another guy named Mr. McDaniels to travel around and work with him too, just like Tommy and his brother. But unfortunately, Gloria is scared of him because he has a reputation and like rumors swirling around that he committed a murder. Mr. McDaniels does nothing to support the rumors of him being like a homicidal maniac. He's like very nice, very kind, but Gloria is still very wary of him, and it's honestly because she's just racist. Like, both main characters in this movie refer to Mr. McDaniels as the N-word, so...
Now, are you so sure he's the only in this territory?
Have I mentioned that these aren't very likable or entertaining leads? Several racist moments later, and by several, I mean over an hour and a half of this movie happens, and the plot is still mostly focused on their marriage, and then finally, in the last 30 minutes, we actually get more information about Mr. McDaniels and like an update on that storyline, and it turns out that Mr. McDaniels did kill someone, but he only did it to protect his girlfriend from a sexual assault. And now everybody's just afraid of him, and he can't go back to his home of Arkansas because said person that he killed was white and they'll hang him for it.
He was a white man. I go back to Arkansas, they go hang me.
To think that this storyline is like a side quest in the movie is actually insane. And it's for all these reasons that I found it very hard to care about what happens in this movie. Nothing too good for a cowboy? Maybe they should have called it Nothing Too Boring for a Cowboy. Anyways, next movie. The Unbelievables is a 23-minute TV show pilot that was set to become a full-blown series, and this is the only time I'm ever gonna mention anything about television in this video because I want to just focus on the films. But when I discovered this, it was like simply too good to be true. Like, I couldn't not mention it. The series is a comedy about the life of superheroes that have retired, and when I first discovered this, I was like, okay, so what? Big deal. But then I found out that Steve Carell is in this, and that makes The Unbelievables part 1 of the Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling trilogy. It's another part of the RCU. The other thing I find interesting about this is that it's the only content that Ryan has ever been in that is involving superheroes. Thank God. Ryan, please never join the MCU. It's jury duty for actors, and I'm tired of pretending like it's not. Besides the pilot, there's supposedly other episodes of this that do exist, like they were filmed, but I couldn't find them anywhere, which leads me to believe that there is Ryan Gosling lost media out there. And I'm somebody who loves to watch videos about lost media, so I was like, oh my god, if somebody could find this, it would literally make my life. What the heck? What? We have a sponsor for today's video? The Unbelievables might be impossible to find online, but I'll tell you what's not impossible. Learning something new, thanks to this week's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of courses and thousands of members who come together to explore their creative interests and new endeavors. And whether you're interested in learning about illustration, graphic design, photography, film, music, or even if you want to level up your career and like start a new side hustle, Skillshare has the perfect course for you. One of the things that drew me initially to Skillshare was how the community really is all about learning. I found myself trying to learn about creative writing time and time again, but didn't feel the motivation to do it myself because there was no one else doing it with me. And that's where I really think Skillshare is special, because there's so many users learning and trying new creative projects right there with you, and you can learn at your own pace. One course I enjoyed in particular is Creative Writing for All by Emily Gold, which is a 10-day journaling challenge. Journaling Wrestling was something that I already loved to do, but I really struggled being consistent with it, despite the fact that every time I did it, it boosted my mood, it boosted my creativity, but the days that I couldn't think of anything to write really began to discourage me. And because of that, I hadn't touched my journal in like a month. And something really cool that we did in this challenge was get assigned a prompt, and the prompt was, "Today I noticed." So every day I began writing about something new that I noticed, whether it be taste, touch, smell, my own feelings, somebody else's feelings. And not only was this fun, but it really did help me become more consistent. So I just let loose, and it was amazing to see other people also sharing the things that they noticed today. So my question to you is, where will your Skillshare journey take you? The first 1,000 of you to click the link in the description will get an entire free month of Skillshare. So why not choose from thousands of courses on the biggest online community for creatives that there is? Click the link in the description and find your creative destiny today. Thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and now back to Ryan Gosling. Remember the Titans is about a football coach in the early 1970s who's trying to integrate two teams from two different schools that are just now barely desegregating. But the problem is that they already have a football coach, and his name is Coach Yost. So first of all, it doesn't help that these kids are really racist. It's also like they already have this coach that they like know and like. So obviously that's gonna make it extra hard for him to come to this school. Coach Boone actually denies getting put into this coach position at the school because he doesn't want to step on Yost's toes. But after he sees how much it means to the black community, he ends up accepting the role and asks Yost if he will be his co-coach. And so when Boone takes over, one of his goals is to have his white students and his black students get to know each other. And Ryan Gosling is one of the players from TC Williams. And so he gets assigned to get to know one of his teammates, and he's showing him the music that he likes. And it's one of the only moments in this movie that is like truly funny.
What do you think of this one?
Does the term cruel and unusual punishment mean anything to you?
That being said, Ryan Gosling is hardly in this movie. The plot mainly focuses on Coach Boone and his developing relationship with Yost, as well as these two students named Jerry and Julius. And I will say, although this movie does try to be wholesome, and it really is at times, a lot of the developments in like the relationships in it just seem very kind of like lazy. Like for example, when Jerry and Julius first become roommates, Jerry literally starts a fight with him because he hates his poster so much that he's putting on his wall, and it's literally just a poster of a black person winning a marathon. And honestly, I can't say that this easily doesn't make sense for something that would happen in 2023 as well, because right-wing folks will literally see a person of color in media and be like, what about me? What the hell? This is so woke. What the F? But my point is that this moment is never revisited, nor is it like apologized for. And even when Gary and Julius start becoming friends, Gary's girlfriend is like very blatantly racist to him. She literally refuses to shake his hand, and Gary does little to nothing to defend Julius from this kind of thing. And by the end of the movie, she ends up apologizing to Julius, but like it feels like it just came out of completely nowhere. Like when? How'd this happen? Like the implication almost kind of feels like, oh, if you're calm and docile enough about racism, then people will come around someday. Like, there's also a queer-coded character in this movie that is handled very strangely. This kid's name is Sunshine, and it's heavily implied that he's gay. Like, every adult in this movie calls him hippie boy. They also have him assault Gary by unconsensually kissing him, which is so weird and not casual in the way that the film tries to play it off to be. But I will say, Ryan Gosling dancing and singing throughout this whole ordeal is pretty funny. Anyways, I have tons of complaints about this movie, but I mean, it's a Disney movie about racism. You can only expect to get so much from it. The Believer is about a Jewish dude named Danny who is basically ashamed of who he is, and he dresses up like a Nazi and associates with Nazi groups. He like leads seminars against Jewish people, and it's clear that Danny is very mentally ill. And throughout the movie, he operates under like extreme moments of cognitive dissonance because he'll literally be with a group of Nazis vandalizing a temple, but then tell them not to touch the letters in the Torah. And when the Nazis ask him why,
Don't touch the letters, okay?
Why the fuck not?
Just don't!
he doesn't tell them, but there's actually a plethora of reasons why. For one, it's extremely disrespectful. For two, apparently you can smudge the ink or tear this sacred paper pretty easily, so you can tell that it hurts him to see it treated this way. He even ends up secretly taking it home with him so that he can try to repair it, but not before they literally plant a bomb in this temple. Like, Danny and one of the others plant a bomb underneath one of the panels near the altar. However, interestingly enough, the next day they find out that this never went off, and that the power cell for the timer gave out 13 minutes before it was supposed to go off. And as this rabbi on the news explains, 13 is a mystical number in the Jewish faith. So you're like, did he tamper with it? Was that him? It isn't ever made clear if it was him that purposefully tampered with it so it wouldn't go off, or if this was supposed to be like God telling Danny, like, knock this shit off, like, you know, shut the fuck up. I don't know. Danny goes through his things and finds an alit. Sorry if I'm saying this incorrectly, by the way. I did Google it, but who knows how accurate what I found was. So an alit is a prayer shawl, and he ties it around his waist. And not only does this show us that he still has a connection to his faith and is obviously very confused as to who he is and ashamed of himself, but this alit causes a huge problem for him later because one of his fucked up Nazi friends tries to pressure him into a Jewish person. And Danny makes excuses saying he's a bad shot, but the Nazi keeps on goading him on, so he purposefully misses the person. And in that moment, the Nazi sees that he's wearing the alit, which leads to a whole scuffle where Danny has to shoot him in the leg to get away. Throughout the movie, Danny continues to struggle between his culture and his faith versus his wannabe, like, fake Nazism. And it's both upsetting and pretty frustrating to watch. And his reasoning behind this is kind of only partially explained because they show flashbacks of him when he's in Jewish school. And in each one of these flashbacks, he's super defiant in school and questioning all the teachings of God. And I just didn't really feel like this was like too good of like an explanation as to how he got from 0 to 100 with like full-blown like Nazism. Like, I really wish that it was fleshed out a lot more. And I would say that this movie's biggest pitfall really is underdeveloping characters. Like, for example, Danny has this weird Nazi girlfriend. Her name is Carla, and their connection is very surface level, which wouldn't matter as much if she weren't a key role in the ending of this film. But one day after him and Carla have sex, she finds the Torah that he stole in his closet, and she asks him if he can read it to her.
I want you to teach it to me.
Why?
Not your enemy.
And Danny agrees, but like with the other people, he tells her not to touch the letters and also not to be naked in front of it.
Look, put something on, right? You're not supposed to be naked in front of it.
But the more that he teaches her Hebrew, the more it seems like he's growing closer to his culture, and even ends up going to a Jewish bookstore where he runs into an old classmate of his. And something funny about this is his classmate is like, "What are you up to? I bet it's something strange."
What about you? What are you doing? There's something strange, I bet.
But he gets invited to go to the temple, and from there on out, he's pretty much living a double life. He goes to the temple by day and does Nazi seminars at night. And by the end of this movie, he ends up going to the temple and finding Carla there, participating in the service. And it's pretty obvious that she's more interested in just participating in the Jewish faith than being a Nazi anymore. And Danny tells her to leave, but she says no and doesn't understand why he's saying this. He then convinces his friend from the bookstore to let him daven, which is reciting a Jewish prayer. And in the middle of the davening, he admits to having planted a bomb inside the temple.
We need to get out of the room.
We have an emergency. Everybody needs to exit the building.
But everybody hurries up and, evacuates the temple except for him. And he chooses to stay behind and die. This was a pretty crazy and impactful ending, in my opinion. And it was sad for a variety of conflicting reasons. But the absolute wildest thing was that as soon as this movie ended on Amazon Prime, they immediately suggested Dungeons and Dragons next. I was in my feelings. And then it's next up, Dungeons and Dragons.
Cool.
The Slaughter Rule has got to be one of the most obscure Ryan Gosling movies on this list. It's not streaming anywhere. I couldn't even find it in other countries using a VPN. I had to watch it on this sketchy ass website that I found through a link, and these were the ads underneath it. So give me a like if you appreciate my computer getting multiple diseases to make this video. This movie is about a Montana boy named Roy Chutney, which is the most country name of all. This is also one of the most depressing movies on this list because the movie begins with Roy finding out that his father has just died, and it may have been a suicide. He's been estranged from his father since his parents divorced and his dad remarried, and it doesn't help that his mom is also super emotionally vacant and not there for him. But his problems only get worse because when he shows up to school, he finds out that he's being cut from his football team because of some sort of government cutbacks. And even though government money is a big reason for him getting kicked off of the team, his coach also makes it a point to tell him that he didn't want him on the team anymore because he wasn't sure if he could emotionally handle it.
You ain't angry enough. And I ain't got room for ain't angry enough.
His coach really said, hold on, hold my football. I'm gonna kick this guy while he's down. It literally never gets better for Roy throughout this movie. In fact, it gets worse. I would say much worse. He ends up finding somewhat of a father figure through this guy named Gideon, who puts together a makeshift football team for all the local kids to be in. And you just might assume, like me, by looking at this film's cover, oh, this is gonna be really cute from here on out. Aw, they're gonna bond and he's gonna be like his new dad. God, no. It turns out that Gideon really only operates like a kid's football team because he takes advantage of young boys. There's various scenes where Gideon tells Roy super inappropriate stuff about himself.
God's honest truth is, I ain't never been with a woman that I ain't paid straight up for.
And even goes as far as groping him. And what makes this even more sad is that even though this keeps happening and Gideon makes Roy super uncomfortable, he keeps attending his football practices because he literally doesn't have any other parental figure that's there for him. And also he's emotionally vulnerable and 17. Oh yeah, and there's all these rumors going around about Gideon that some kid died in his care last time he had a football team.
Lem says kid's dangerous. He got some kid killed up in Hashim.
Len doesn't know jack shit about jack shit.
The rumor is pretty much that he took him out on a boat and then they never came back. And it isn't until the end of the film where you actually find out what kind of happened to him. But when you do, you're like, okay, die. Okay, die then. Outside of Gideon, he briefly has a fling with this girl who works at a bar, which is really gross because she's clearly an adult. In fact, later on in the movie, she literally breaks up with him for being too immature.
I think I liked you better when I thought you were someone else.
Who did you think I was?
Someone a little older.
Yeah, he's gonna be immature. He's like, a kid?
I mean, I would love to see who you grow into.
I'm not even sure if the creators of this movie really even realize how, weird this is. Because she's kind of painted in, a somewhat sympathetic light. But either way, every adult in Roy's life is very destructive. Towards the end of the movie, Gideon takes Roy out ice fishing. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, Roy's gonna die. That's it, we're dead. But Roy actually confronts Gideon about all the rumors dealing with the kid dying under his wing. And Gideon says that he fell out of the boat and then he just couldn't get him back in. And it was as simple as that. But Roy doesn't take that for an answer and he gets straight to the point and he's like, what were you doing with that kid on that boat?
What were you doing with him? What were you doing with him out there in that boat, Gideon?
And Gideon doesn't outright admit to grooming this kid or doing anything inappropriate with him per se, but it's very, very clear that something inappropriate was going on from the way that he describes him. He's like, his hands are so soft. He reminds me of you.
Yeah, he looked me straight in the eye. Just like you. Your wide shoulders and Soft as hands.
Anyways, several creepy scenes later, during one of their football games, Tracy gets seriously injured, which leads to Gideon telling the team that the game is over and that they need to go home. But Roy gets really pissed off because he thinks that if they give up now, that Tracy basically got hurt for no reason. And he starts screaming at Gideon that he's not gonna leave. And then Gideon grabs him by the penis?
Bastards, and they'll shit all over a mama's boy like you.
And then finally, thank fuck, Roy beats the shit out of him. I was cheering him on so hard, I was like, yes! Oh. Ryan's acting in this scene, by the way, impeccable. Impeccable. No pecs to be found.
Don't fucking touch me.
And when he finishes beating his ass, he gets in Gideon's truck and drives down to the train tracks where his father died, potentially of suicide. And he just gets out of the car and stares at the train as it passes by. And man, is this scene like tear-jerking. My heart is broken. I'm never gonna recover. Meanwhile, since Gideon doesn't have a car, he's like walking into the wilderness, into the snow, and he's like freezing to death. He's so cold that he like collapses. And let me tell you something. We do not care. This started to become a very good movie in the third act. One about somebody so young, vulnerable, full of pain. And this film would have really been solidified for me as like a hidden gem if it didn't end the way that it ends. For one, I was straight up just hoping that Gideon would die in the snow. But Roy ends up driving the truck back to go find him and help him out of the snow and saves his life potentially. And there's this metaphor going on throughout the movie about him not being able to kill a dying deer. So maybe this is why he doesn't die and why he goes back for him. Maybe it's kind of like he's like a pathetic guy, you know, like miserable guy. And in that way, in that respect, we could kind of feel bad for him and just his horrible existence. The thing that bugs me a little bit about that though is that a dying deer, a dying animal is innocent. Meanwhile, Gideon is not. But even if they didn't kill Gideon, if he at least got some kind of form of punishment or got reprimanded in some way, then I would be more satisfied. Put him in jail. Go die. This is a detective movie, a murder movie, a crime movie, blah, 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 blah. Most importantly, it is a boring movie. Ryan Gosling plays a guy named Richard who meticulously plots out a murder with his best friend, lip injections. Oh, sorry, I mean Justin. His name is Justin. They're BFFs. Richard is like the cool, popular guy with like tons of money. Justin is like the little guy, like he's little, he's an introvert, and he's like a genius. And he covers like all the forensic side of the murder, which could be interesting, but it's really not ever elaborated on why they want to just commit murders other than the fact that they want to see if they could get away with them. Like, if you expect a better explanation than that by the end of the movie, you're shit out of luck and you are going to be bored as rocks. Richard kind of dresses like an anime villain, and he kind of is an anime villain. He bullies Justin around. He says shit like,
You're a jerk off. It's a jerk off.
And they even meet up together like in a secret evil lair to like talk about the murders. And there's this like weird painting of Ryan Gosling there for some reason. But yeah, they plan out murders. And meanwhile, this investigator named Cassie is on their tail, piecing clues together, yada yada yada. I won't bore you with too much details of this, but the best part of the movie happens when she's investigating and a giant monkey attacks her. And he has a big old butt. There's also this really unintentionally funny moment where Sandra Bullock is at a crime scene and one of the investigators accidentally turns on a CD player that was the victim's, and then they're like, sorry, but then they don't turn it off.
Sorry.
Eventually, Cassie collects enough evidence to bring them to court over this stuff. And so the two of them are like, okay, time for a suicide pact. And they meet up together in their evil lair to commit the deed. But right as Justin is about to pull the trigger, he realizes that Richard isn't planning on upkeeping his end of this deal. And then Cassie, who's been following them, pops up, and then there's this crazy shootout, and she ends up having to throw Ryan Gosling off of this comedically high Frankenstein cliff. Anyways, that's the movie. Lip injections, has to go to jail. This isn't even the best movie that exists where Ryan Gosling dies via head injury. So, on to the next one. The United States of Leland is about a teenager named Leland who commits a horrible murder that nobody is really sure why he did it, including himself. Like, he's not really sure why, and that doesn't really get revealed until the end of the movie. Like, he himself even says, "I remember nothing from that day."
When I say I don't remember that day, I'm not lying. I wish I did, but I just don't.
But the person in question that he murdered was his ex-girlfriend's mentally disabled brother. And I know this is 2003 and we're far from being politically correct, but holy crap, there isn't a single person in this movie that doesn't refer to this kid as the R slur. Like, it's bad. But anyways, his ex-girlfriend's name is Becky. I don't know if we have any Hunger Games stands in the crowd or any Donnie Darko stands, but this is the girl from both those movies. We love her. I don't know. I get excited every time I see this girl, Jenna Malone. But we learn about her and Leland's relationship through flashbacks. And right off the top, I just gotta say, this movie is so 2000s and very like emo coded. There's no other way to describe it because within like the first 30 minutes, there's 3 different Pixies songs that play.
With her lips, she said.
Through their flashbacks, we learn that her and Leland had like a meet cute inside of a record store. It's really, really corny, and I kind of love it.
Did you really come over here to ask me about my screwed up life?
But in the present day, in the aftermath of the murder, Leland ends up in a detention center for juvenile kids. And that's where he meets a teacher named Pearl. And Pearl is a writer that's been struggling. He's got like a case of writer's block going on. So when he learns that Leland is in his class, and not only did he just commit a murder, but he's also related to another really famous writer, he's like, oh, I'm gonna get the scoop. I'm gonna write a book about this. And this whole concept is really interesting, and it's not to say that Don Cheadle's acting isn't really good, because it is, but unfortunately Pearl is where this movie really loses me. Like, the entire story slows down to focus on him cheating on his girlfriend. Almost the entirety of the first 35 minutes is him cheating on his girlfriend, and Leland writing in his journal, yes, briefly, but we learn next to nothing about all the other characters. And there is too many to warrant this much Pearl. I don't give a rat's ass about Pearl.
Moret, no, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wanna talk.
We find out Becky has a problem with drugs and was previously taken advantage of by a guy that was like way older than her and providing her these drugs. And that all took place before her and Leland started dating. But when he got out of jail, she started talking to him again while they're together. So Leland is like, rest in peace. What is this? Why are you talking to this guy? And she seems really conflicted about it and can't even say that she doesn't love him. So that's the reason why they break up. Becky also has a sister that's hardly in this movie named Julie, and she has a boyfriend named Alan who is also barely in this movie but ends up being really important. Julie ends up breaking up with Alan, and this really like crushes him, but we don't really know enough about him or get to know him enough to be like, oh man, I feel bad for this guy. But by the end of the movie, he's so enraged by Leland and how he tore their family apart and consequently caused this breakup that he robs like an oil change place and does this just so that he could go to jail and he's able to kill Leland. It all feels very, very sudden and way less emotionally impactful than it should. And as this movie's ending, we get kind of like a flashback explanation of why he did in fact kill this kid. And it was basically because he thought that he was doing him a favor because he seems sad. It's really fucked up and twisted, and it could have been interesting to hear more about that. And we do hear him say he's sorry, but that doesn't change anything, which seems like the most accurate thing that you could hear this guy say.
You know I'm sorry, don't you, bro?
I do. I know you are.
It doesn't change anything.
Nothing is gonna change the horrible reality of what he did. Nothing is gonna change the impact of that on the family. So does it mean anything to be sorry at this point? I don't know. That's an interesting thing to explore. Did it get explored though? I really wish I could do surgery on this movie, like a game of operation, because there's some good acting from Ryan Gosling in this that had me kind of in my feels, but none of the plot points were really done any justice. This movie was a cultural reset, man, and this put Gosman on the map. In the 2000s, this was the pinnacle of romance, which is cool if you watched the movie and just enjoyed it like a normal person, but bad if you happen to be a guy and watch this and then say, you know what, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try that out, because this movie is toxic with a capital T. I definitely watched this movie when I was like 10 years old and thought it was like the deepest thing ever, but watching it as an adult, I was pretty alarmed by so many like toxic things in it, and some of it was like downright cringe. But I will admit that the ending still made me cry. I know I'm pathetic, but listen to this music for half a second and tell me you don't feel something. If you hear that song and old people are dying to it, you are gonna shed a little bit of a goofy goober teardrop. For those of you who don't remember or are too young to know, The Notebook is an adaptation of a Nicholas Sparks book by the same name. And let me tell you something, Nicholas Sparks literally single-handedly grabbed the chick flick romance genre by its gonads in the early 2000s. Like all of these right here were based on his books. Miley Cyrus and Liam Hemsworth were even in one of these things. But The Notebook has definitely got to be the most influential and infamous of all. It's about this couple named Noah and Allie. Noah is from a poor family, and Allie is like the stereotypical rich Southern belle type of girl. The movie kicks off when Noah decides to be a weird, creepy weirdo guy and threatens to kill himself in front of Allie if she doesn't go on a date with him, while she's on a date with somebody else, mind you.
I'm gonna ask you one more time. Will you or will you not go out with me?
Okay, fine. I'll go out with you.
And then he goes around bugging her and asking her about the date that she was threatened into. And even though she tells him no again, he keeps following her. He then goes to a movie theater that she's at with her friends and sits down next to her unasked for. And then that is finally how their summer of love begins. Nothing quite like that old trope of stalking equals love. But their romance begins, and then they show clips of them hanging out together and getting in a bunch of fights. Like, oh, how romantic. They're fighting. Like, seriously? What was everybody smoking in the early 2000s? Like, Allie straight up hits Noah, and the narrator is just kind of like, yeah, they're just like that.
And they challenged each other every day.
Like, what? She actually hits him various times throughout the movie, and you're just kind of like, ma'am? Anyways, since Allie's family is rich, and Noah doesn't have...
Well, he didn't have 2 dimes to rub together.
It's suffice to say they hate him. Her dad also has a big, giant monster mustache that would also indicate that he hates poor people.
In theory, we're both millionaires, but in reality, we live with a bunch of hoes.
You see a guy with a mustache like that, he does not like poor people, or he's the Eggman. I found that the most unbelievably cringe thing that I completely forgot about or just didn't understand because last time I watched it, I was 10. When they fall in love, they have sex together on a plantation.
Windsor Plantation.
And Noah is like, rumor has it that Francis Marion proposed to his wife here.
Rumor has it that Francis Marion he proposed to his wife right here on these
These steps.
And I'm just like, do you know what else happened on the plantation? Cause it's not just that. And Noah is like, I'm gonna buy this one day and I'm gonna fix it up for you and I'm gonna build an art room for you here. And it's just like, again, you really gotta turn your brain off to move forward after this point. Allie and Noah end up getting in a fight because her family calls him trash, and then that makes him feel like he should break up with her because she deserves better. You know, like typical, I'm not good enough for you, so I must leave.
He is trash!
But yeah, it's because of that they break up, and then Allie's parents force her to move away because they're like, ew, poor people near my daughter, I'm gonna flow up. And she doesn't even have a chance to say bye to Noah. They're just like, we're leaving right now. We're going to NYC, baby. And she shows up to his job to try to find him and say goodbye, but he's not there, so she finds his friend Tiny Tim instead. And he says like the most brutally honest thing ever.
We said some things we didn't mean, but it's not over.
It is over. Leave it alone. Let it go.
Like, damn, Tiny Tim, have a heart.
If he wants to talk to you, he'll write. If not...
When Noah hears that she's moved to NYC, he's desperate to contact her and writes her every day for 365 days. But because her mom hates him so much, like even more than her mustache twirling father, she literally makes sure their romance flops by stealing all of the letters that Noah wrote to her. And because he never wrote, she falls in love with this other guy named Lon. And she gets engaged to him, and in typical rom-com fashion, she literally drops his ass in a heartbeat when she hears that Noah has fixed up the old plantation for her. At which point the narrator refers to it as the old house, but like we've already established what it actually is, so it's kind of like Allie tells her fiance that she needs some time to think, but not to take it seriously, like, no, it's okay, everything's fine. And Lon is just like totally naive and is like, okay, yeah, take your time.
Look, it's okay to be nervous, right? It's normal to get cold feet before your wedding.
No.
And it's like, girl, if you're going to meet up with your ex-boyfriend, like, it's so over. Just admit it. It is so over. But she goes and meets up with him and is like, yeah, nothing is gonna happen here, and surely nothing will happen. We're definitely not gonna have sex. But throughout the movie, Duke, a man in a retirement home, is reading this story to a woman with dementia. And of course, this whole time, Duke and this woman are Noah and Allie. Unfortunately, watching it as an adult, it's very obvious. But they fall in love again, and there's no denying there's some nice scenes in here. Like, there's this scene where they go out on the boat and there's all these swans, like, dang. And then Ryan Gosling's acting, it's really good here, especially with the like, what do you want?
What do you want? What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
And then they have that dramatic kiss in the rain, and I think that's why I have some nostalgia for this film.
Still isn't over.
That whole boat scene and the dramatic kiss in the rain is just like, I don't know, it has me in a little bit of a chokehold. I'm corny like that, and I'll admit it. Inevitably, Dawn finds out that she's cheated on him, and he's literally so nice about it. He's like, I need you, I love you, I don't want to let you go, blah, blah, blah. But of course she chooses Noah. And then in present day, Allie briefly realizes that this is them and that this is her husband, and they hug each other and kiss each other, and it's all very sad. And then they die together in their bed, and it's sad. It is. And I hate this movie, and it's very bad for society, but damn, it is sad. I really, really hate to end part one right here because I feel like we were just getting to the good stuff. But I literally still have so much more of this thing to edit. Like, I think if it was one part, it would definitely be like 3 hours. And your girl needs to work on her sponsorships. I'm sorry. With that being said, thank you guys so freaking much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this, because if you don't, then I'm gonna be sad, and also I'm not gonna want to finish this. So give me a like if you really do want to see the next part. I kind of had this issue happen when I made a video about Disney musicals. Like the first one didn't do that well, and then I was like, well, you know what? Then I'm not gonna finish it. Like I'm a little tiny freaking dumb baby like that. So you gotta really tell me you love it. Big shout out to my patrons. They've been supportive of me throughout this whole process. I've been watching these movies for a whole month, and goddamn, it's so much work. I said to myself, oh, I'm just gonna watch all the Ryan Gosling movies. It's not gonna be a big deal. It was yeah. My next video is coming out in a few days, and can you guess what it's about? Thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Be sure to click that link below. Bye bye.